Hello and welcome to another video, and this time round we're going to be looking at Astro Guide to Astroberry. And Astroberry is a ready-to-use system which runs on a Raspberry Pi piece of hardware, and through that you can control your telescope mount, camera, focuser and other parts of hardware that use the INDI drivers or INDI server. So yes, there are a handful of videos already out there on Astroberry. However, these focus particular on using that system. However, what I want to do is take one step further back and go over the actual installing and setup of Astroberry itself. So please watch this video. We're going to keep things simple. Because as I know, there's a lot of questions out there on forums and various groups about the actual installation of Astroberry. Hopefully some of those will be answered. So as it says in this video, we're going to start from the initial steps of actually downloading Astroberry, right through to setting it up on the Raspberry Pi, setting up different connections, whether it's to your local Wi-Fi or whether it's to your actual mount and camera itself. So in this video, I'll be using a MacBook, so Apple operating system, an HEQ5 mount, and we'll also be connecting to a Canon DSLR camera. But the video should be enough to give you an idea, or at least a basic guide. And from there, you should be able to connect to any mount or camera through the INDI drivers or the INDI server. So on top of the mount and the Canon DSLR camera, I'll be using the minimum requirements, which is a Raspberry Pi 3. And I'll also be using a micro SD card with storage of 16 gigabytes on it as well. The recommended requirements is a Raspberry Pi 4 and also an SD with storage or size of 32 gigabytes. So I am using the minimum. However, things should be a little bit more quicker. And obviously, if you add further drivers or you want to control further bits of hardware rather than just a mount and a camera, you might be better off with the actual recommended specifications rather than the minimum. Okay, so to get things started, we need to download the actual Astroberry server image itself. So we'll go to astroberry.io. I'll put the links in the description of the video. So anyway, Astroberry server website, and then if we scroll down a little bit, we can see download. So click onto the download section, and red button here for the latest server released at the time is 2.03. So again, we click download, and that'll begin downloading it's a zip file, but inside there will be the Astroberry server image file. So while that's downloading, the other app that we will need, or the app that will help us copy the image across to an SD card, is a free tool called Etcher. So from here, I'm on a Mac operating system, so I'll just click download for that. However, if you're on a Windows or Linux, you can click the specific installer and download the correct version for your operating system. So I'm just going to click on download. Nothing else to do. Starts to download immediately for us. Okay, so the downloads are completed. And first off, on the Mac to install Etcher, we just double click on it. Again, this will be similar to Windows, except in Mac OS, we just drag the icon across to applications, and that is the installation done for us. If we return back to downloads, and you will see here we've got the Astroberry server zip file, and we just double click on that, and that will expand the zip file for us. and we will end up with the image file by itself as well. So if we just give that a few seconds, as you can see the progress bar says it's unzipping it for us. And it's complete. So there you can see the top file there name is Astroberry Server 203 image. So the next step we want to do is copy the image file across to our SD card that we will be using for the Raspberry Pi. But the first thing we need to do is make sure that the SD card is formatted completely empty and there's nothing on there. Okay, so to format the SD card, and the SD card I've put into a USB SD card reader. On the MacBook, we can use a program called Disk Utility. So if you press Command and space and type in Disk Utility, it'll open this window for you. And on the left-hand side there, we can see the SD card, which is known as boot. That actually might have a different name on your card. But anyway, that's the one that we want to erase and format. So when you're doing this, just be careful that you're 100% sure you've got the right volume or drive selected, and you're not going to be erasing anything that you shouldn't be. So we're just going to click on erase, and the option is either an MS-DOS FAT32 or MS-DOS FAT. FAT stands for File Allocation Table, and it's just the way that the actual files are indexed on the SD card itself. And we're going to click erase, and it's going to do its thing. So when we refresh on that, you can see here, so I knew this was going to happen, I just wanted to show you a way around it. So I've got a 16 gig SD card here. However, it is only showing 268 megabytes available. So obviously we've got a lot of space which was not formatted, or it's not being read correctly. So this is because on this SD card, I've previously had some type of Raspberry Pi server running on the card, and the format has been, well, Disk Utility has been able to see that allocation of space, and therefore cannot erase or format that area as well. So to get around this, we have to launch Terminal, which is similar to kind of an MS-DOS prompt on Windows. And within here, so this is again specific to a Mac operating system. And what we want to do is we want to run a little program called Disk Util and type in the parameter list. That gives us, I guess, like a version of what we could see on the Disk Utility program itself. And in here, if we look down, we can see our disk 2. Just highlight that. So disk 2, as we can see, should be 16 gigabyte. However, we've only got 268 megabyte available to us. So that matches what we were seeing in the Disk Utility app itself. So to clear or format this 100%, we need to type the following. And again, I'll add this into the description down below. So we want to use the disk util command, erase disk. We're going to be using F32 as the file allocation system. Okay, we want to use the format command, and we are indicating that it's on dev2 disk 2 is where we want to run this. And it'll ask us for our password, which should be the administrator password, or perhaps what you log into on your MacBook or your laptop with. Just type that in. And and it's starting the formatting itself. So it's completed already. And if we do another disk util list, we can now see there that 15.9 or 16 gigabyte is the size of the disk, and 16.9 is available. And if we go to the disk utility interface as well, and it's renamed it now to my SD card, which is part of the command that we've just ran, you'll see there we've got a full, well, just under 16 gigabyte free. So that indicates that the format has been completed, which is good to see. Okay, so continuing on, I'm going to close disk utility and close our terminal window. And in applications, we're going to start up the Etcher application that we downloaded and installed before. So we get a warning just to say this has been downloaded. Are we sure we want to open it? So I'm just going to say yes or open. And we can now see the Etcher app opened. And from here, we're just going to simply select the file that we downloaded. And this Etcher app will transfer it or flash the SD card itself with the image. Okay, so we'll do that next. Okay, so within Etcher, we just simply go to Flash from File. We go to our Downloads folder, or wherever you've downloaded the Astro Server zip file to. And if you remember, I unzipped that, and this is the actual image file itself. So Astroberry Server 203.image. Do not select the .zip. We'll just go for the .image file here. Click on Open, select Target. And there's our 15.9 16 gigabyte SD card. Just checked it to say that that's where we want to install it to. Click on select one, and we just need our password. And it is copying the image file across to our SD card now. So as you can see, that's going to take, it's going up between 10 to 14 minutes. So we'll let that run, and then we'll come back onto the next steps. Okay, so we're going to move away from the laptop for just a few minutes. I just want you to show what the next step is with the actual Raspberry Pi itself. So the image has finished copying across to the SD card, which took about 12 to 13 minutes to do that. And what I've got here is the Raspberry Pi itself in a case, and all I've done is placed the SD card into the Raspberry Pi. So apologies for the quality of the next few minutes, but I can't record the actual screen directly yet. So within the Raspberry Pi, I'm just going to plug in the HDMI cable, okay? And then to boot up the Raspberry Pi, I'm going to connect it with power. And if we watch the monitor, so the HDMI cable is just connected to the monitor itself, and the Raspberry Pi is booting up. So I'm not doing anything here or touching anything. So it's setting itself up. Should take about 20 seconds or so. It's just restarting. Okay, so Raspberry Pi is now loading up with Astroberry software on it. And once we get to this screen, I think it does one final restart, but otherwise it looks like we are successful. Okay, so again, I'm not actually doing anything here, just letting the Raspberry Pi do its own stuff. And we are back to the Astroberry desktop itself. So again, I haven't had to do anything except for downloading Astroberry, formatting the SD card, and copying Astroberry across to the SD card itself, placing that within the Raspberry Pi, connecting the HDMI cable for the monitor, and powering it up. Okay, so if we had a keyboard and mouse, we could actually connect to the Raspberry Pi itself. However, what I want to do is show you how we can do the rest of the setup, which includes connecting the Raspberry Pi to our Wi-Fi connection using the laptop. So again, we're not going to have to find a separate mouse or a separate keyboard. We can do everything remotely, which at the end of the day is what we want to do when we're out in the field. Run this remotely without having to have a keyboard or mouse next to our telescope and mount. Okay, so we'll jump back across now to the laptop and we'll go from there. Okay, so we're going to get the Raspberry Pi connected to our home Wi-Fi. And to do this first, we're going to do this without a mouse and a keyboard actually connected to the Raspberry Pi. So as you can probably tell, the video quality is improved again. We are now looking at my laptop desktop. And what Astroberry actually does is it creates a Wi-Fi hotspot called Astroberry. So this Wi-Fi hotspot is actually coming directly from the Raspberry Pi itself. So I'm going to drop off the Art Deco SSID, which is what I'm currently connected to on my laptop, and I'm going to connect to the Astroberry Wi-Fi hotspot. So click on that. It asks me for a password to join the Astroberry Wi-Fi or hotspot. And the default password for this is just Astroberry. Click on join. And if we look at the top right hand here, you can see the Wi-Fi signal trying to connect. And we are now connected. Now, although you can't see this, I've kept the monitor connected to the Raspberry Pi itself via the HDMI cable. So if you want to do that, you don't have to, but it allows you just to visually see what's happening on the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so we're going to connect to the Astroberry server itself, which is obviously on the Raspberry Pi. And to do that, we go to astroberry.local. And using the Astroberry or Raspberry Pi Wi-Fi hotspot, which we connected to just before, we are now connecting through to the Astroberry server itself. Okay, so apologize if this is out of focus a little bit. I'll try and adjust that, but we'll only be on here for a few minutes. Basically, we click on the green start button. Okay, so this is us connecting to the Astroberry server. And what we're doing here, just as a recap, is we're going to get the Raspberry Pi to connect to my house or home Wi-Fi, and then from there it'll be easier again for the connection. So I've just clicked on the green start button, and then it asks me to click on the green connect button, and again the password is Astroberry. So it logs on, and you can see within our desktop browser, which I'm using Chrome, we see a reflection of what was on the HDMI cable before on the other monitor. And if I just do this, move the camera to the side to see the other monitor, we can see the mouse or the cursor moving around. Okay, so as I said, what we're going to do here is we're going to connect the Raspberry Pi to our Wi-Fi. So we do that, so just another password, so Astroberry. Okay, so it's asking us to configure the Raspberry Pi. If I just leave everything as is, hostname, Astroberry, etc, etc, we're not actually going to be changing anything here. We don't need to change anything. You can set up the time zone, the locale if you want to, but nothing is required to be changed. If you did want to change the password from Astroberry, you could do that within there. However, this is just the configuration for the boot up of the Raspberry Pi itself. So I'm just going to click OK. We don't need to change anything. And we've got some menus at the top, which is we've got a web browser, file manager, terminal, KStars, which we'll come on to later. And on the left hand side here, if we click on the applications menu, we've got a set of other applications, obviously if needed. We'll get to them in a second. We've got the sidebar on the left hand side here, settings, the actual web manager itself, GPS, etc, etc, if we wanted to set them up. So for the time being, apologies, we're going to go into settings at the top. So I'm just going to click on the little arrow there to close that tab. System tool, no, sorry, not system tools. It is in, where are we? Preferences, and then advanced network configuration. And this is going to allow us to set up our Wi-Fi connection. Just adjust that. Okay, so Astroberry hotspot is what's being used at the minute. I'm going to click on the, oh sorry, I don't need to click on the plus because we've got a wireless connection there. If we double click on it, this is kind of like a default one that's been set up. And the SSID, now this is where you will type in your own details for your own home Wi-Fi. So SSID there, Alt-Deco, that's my personal one. Please don't type that in, obviously you won't be able to connect, but you will need to find out what your Wi-Fi ID actually is. Then go on to Wi-Fi security. If we click on show password, we can actually see it is change me. So yes, let's change me. And I'm going to type in my Wi-Fi password here. And then simply hit save. Okay, now in the top right hand corner, if I get this right, where we connect to a hidden Wi-Fi network. Click on connection. There's the wireless connection that we've just created, obviously through the connections. I'm just going to drop that down, select it, and choose connect. Now that should connect us. I'm just thinking about it. Okay, so we can tell because if we go to our Wi-Fi on the laptop, you can now see that Astroberry is no longer available. because from the Raspberry Pi point of view, it's killed that Wi-Fi hotspot because it's connected to our AutoDeco, which is my own personal Wi-Fi. So the Raspberry Pi, sorry, the Astroberry remote page has reset itself. So I haven't changed anything here. It's just reset itself to a green connect. Click on connect, Astroberry, log in, and we are now connected to, so you can see here, the AutoDeco. So what we're doing here is we've now set up the Raspberry Pi to use my Wi-Fi connection, my home Wi-Fi connection, which is easier than going from the laptop to the Raspberry Pi via the Raspberry Pi's hotspot. Okay, so now that that's set up, the difficult parts are done. We can now move on to KStars, which is the astronomy software or application that's on Astroberry that we'll be using to talk to our mount and talk to our DSLR camera in this example. Okay, so we're back to hopefully a better quality video. So what we're looking at here is the Chrome web browser on my laptop, and we're pointing to the remote desktop through the browser of the Astroberry. So we're going to start by what we need to do first is set up the INDI web manager. So this is similar to, if you're familiar with the ASCOM drivers on a regular PC connection. So instead, Astroberry is based on these INDI drivers, which is a kind of alternative software library. And it's what is the gap between the hardware, which is our mount or camera, and the software, which is Astroberry itself. So to start the INDI server, quite simple, left-hand side panel. We then click on the telescope icon in the web manager, and we can set up a simulator if we want to do that. So we've got like already selected CCD simulator, focuser simulator, telescope simulator. However, what I'm going to do is actually connect to my HQE5 mount. Okay, so we'll give it a profile name. And then from the drop-down box, this is a big list of drivers or services that we want the new profile to use. So I don't want it to use the CCD simulator, or the focuser one. So I can just type focus to filter down that list. And I don't want it to use the telescope simulator. So just by unchecking that, we effectively clear out the list of drivers that we're going to be using. So instead, we are going to add the EQ mod mount. Okay, and the other one I'm going to add is the Canon DSLR driver, because that's the type of camera I'm going to be connecting to. See there, those are listed. HEQ5 is the name. I'm going to click on add, so that kind of saves this profile into the drop down at the top. HEQ5. I want it to auto start, and I want it to auto connect every time I start up the Raspberry Pi itself. So all we'll do now is simply click on the green button, the start, and the server should change to online. I'll just give it a second or so. Oh, actually, I forgot to save the drivers with that. Hang on, let's just quickly add these back in, DSLR and the EQ mod mount. Click on start, and there we go. Okay, so this time it started the server with the Canon DSLR and the EQ mod mount drivers. Okay, so what I'm running on that side. The next thing we want to do is actually launch the KStars software or app. So we can close that. just tidy it up. And then along the top here, we've got another black telescope icon. Click on that and that'll launch KStars for us. So KStars is a free and open astronomy software already installed on Astroberry, which is one of the great things about this. And we're just going to walk through this KStars startup wizard. Okay, so it just asks us to put in our location or our GPS or longitude, latitude position. I'm just going to go to Greenwich, United Kingdom. Obviously, this is just a demonstration. And KStars allows us to download extra data if we want, which is just larger catalogs. I think there's some images in here, etc., etc. So up to you whether you want to add these now or you can add them later. Just click on the install with the tick on it and away it'll go. So I'm just going to close this now and I can do that later if I want to. Click on OK. Thank you for the tip of the day. Close that. And KStars is now loaded. Okay, so this video was obviously just to give a helping Astro guide to how to get Astroberry up and running on a Raspberry Pi. So it's not really a tutorial about KStars or anything like that, but I just want to go through the final step of actually adding the mount and the camera to KStars, and then that way we're proving that not only are we up and running with Astroberry, but everything is connected through to the mount and camera itself. So first off, we're going to launch, we're in KStars, we're going to toggle ECOS, which is a kind of the software which controls the actual mount itself. We're going to add a new profile. I'm just going to call this HEQ5, call it anything you want. The mount, in my particular instance, is a Skywatcher EQ mod mount, which we set up before. And the camera is the Canon DSLR. And then the last thing we need to do on this form is scan for the actual INDI web service or web manager. So it's found that very quickly. Click OK. Pre-populated all the details, and we can just save out this profile. So we can select different profiles, so just HEQ5, and then from here we're going to actually start the service. And all I've got here, which you can't obviously see, is the HEQ5 mount via a USB cable, which is, I guess, the EQ mod type of cable, connected to the Raspberry Pi itself via USB. And also I've got the DSLR camera running through USB as well. You can either run that to the Raspberry Pi, or what I've got is I've actually got it running through a USB hub, and the hub actually connects into the Raspberry Pi itself. So we're all green here. The EQ mount, or the HEQ5 mount, is connected. And second tab just shows all green that the camera is connected itself. So just click on close. So as I say, I'm not going to kind of go into actually setting up or using ECOS. I'm just clicking around to show you that everything's working. I'm going to go into the camera. You can see the camera from the profile is set up as a DSLR, and I'm just going to take an image just to show that's taken. So it's just a 1 second image. I've actually got the dust cap sat on the top of the telescope, so I'm not expecting this to come out very well. Actually, just 1 second's worth of noise. So there you go. There's the actual image from the camera through the Raspberry Pi hardware itself, through the Astroberry software, and being displayed via KStars. To close this down nice and tidily, go back to the setup tab, click on disconnect, That's disconnected, and then we'll click on stop. That stops the ECOS itself, and then we can just close this down. And finally close off the KStars as well. And we're back to the actual desktop. So before I close this off and shut this down, just thank you very much for watching the video. As I said, hopefully, there's a lot of questions out there of how to set a Raspberry Pi up, how to install Astroberry on top of it. And hopefully this answered some of your questions. If you've got anything around KStars side of it or the actual software that's installed on Astroberry, I'm sure there's a lot more other YouTube videos out there as well. But thank you very much for watching this Astro Guide. I'm enjoying making them. Please subscribe, add your comments. I'm still learning. That's a great thing about this. I'm learning from other people as well as I go.